let's cover NPR really quick. Um,
Yes, yes.
okay, so Trump signs an executive order a while ago, and basically the goal of it is to end federal funding for pretty much everything public broadcasting. This includes NPR and PBS, right? So
Hmm.
finally, and his whole reasoning is that, like, look, the whole reason we fund you guys is because you're supposed to bring some sort of benefit to the taxpayer or the State Department, like, for example, Radio Free Asia during Vietnam and now China. They blast American propaganda through all the way through Southeast Asia constantly. Like, that's, one of the many things that they do. Um Now he is arguing that, PBS and NPR are too one-sided and they no longer bring a material benefit to the taxpayer. So we're going to defund them. And obviously NPR sues them back or sues them and says this is clear, uh what's the word? When you oh gosh,
Oh shoot, I'm sorry. I'm not being of much assistance. Overreach, would you call it, or is there a more
no,
specific word?
like when you fire somebody because they pissed you off, what would that be? Like not wrongful termination, but like vengeful
Oh,
or whatever. Um. Anyway,
yeah, something's. I'm sure
they're
it'll come
so
to us.
it's a violation of the First Amendment. That's what they sue him for, and basically they're like, look, this you're like discriminating on us specifically here. So like, what's the deal? And I just kind of want to get your take on it, like. Surely you don't think that there's like some principled stance he's taken here. Like, surely this is just like he's pissed off that they said some mean things about him, and now he's gonna gut the entire thing.
Well, it's principled in the sense that his principle is that he's against those or who are against him. But it's not. It's certainly not principled in a free speech sort of way. Yeah. Look, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like, if I want to try and sound principled, I could say I'm against the defunding of NPR. But on the other hand, it is, state funded media and it does have a particular slant. Now, they have calmed down, I will say, because I've listened to them fairly recently. It doesn't seem to be anywhere near as hysterical as it used to be. I think, especially in the 2016 to 2020 era. So I'll
Right.
give them that. But you know it, from his perspective and honestly from mine, it's like, well, we do have liberal media, we have right-wing media, and whether it be NBC, the New York Times, Fox News, OAN, none of that is state funded. So uh, it's already out there. If you want something with a particular slant, you can go and read or listen to any of those other outlets. Why would Trump, assuming he even has the power to, which that's contested, but if Trump does have the power to take away their funding, then why would he continue to fund people who are against him? So I mean, on one hand, yeah, I see this free speech argument. On the other hand, it's state funded media, so you know you would kind of hope that it wouldn't have such a glaring slant to it. And I get that Trump is just so beyond the pale that it's hard not to have a slant against him. But I mean, there was a period of time where NPR was really just, uh, honestly, it was pretty. I mean, it's hard to describe just how how, how liberal. I think they were probably more liberal than MSNBC at one point in time. So it was eye rollingly bad. So
Yeah,
Uh,
well, here's the thing, Darren. Even if that's the case, let's just go ahead and stipulate that they're borderline communist, right? Stripping their funding because you disagree with their political speech is like the textbook violation of the First Amendment. You know, it doesn't get any worse than that. You know, like you're telling me, and let me just say for the record, so they're not state run, right? They're state funded.
yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense. Okay, all right. Only 2% of NPR's budget comes from federal grants, right? And now for PBS, that number is all the way up to 15%. And the reason that it's such a low number is because obviously they don't want to be at the whim of the State Department, you know? But I mean this idea that like because they receive state funds as a media and news communication outlet that they can't show anything outside of the smallest Overton window you can think of, I think is a little silly, right? And it defies the entire spirit of the First Amendment. Even if it doesn't violate the literal law of the First Amendment, there's no way it doesn't violate the spirit of it.
Oh, yeah, it certainly does. But I guess my thing was like, and I will say, I was not aware that it was only 2% of NPR's, but of their budget. I assumed it was far higher, like closer to half of their funding was, you know, federal money. That was my assumption going in. So with that in mind, uh, I mean, well, I mean, honestly, though, my point still stands. It probably still stands even more. You know, what under what's the why does Trump have to fund them? I mean, assuming he has the power.
It's appropriated by Congress.
Yeah, see that's my thing. I'm not even sure he even has the right to revoke any funding of theirs, but assuming he does, for sake of, this particular argument, if they're against him, then why should he fund them? Why would you be forced to pay for something that's against you?
Yeah, God forbid. God forbid we ask the President of the United States to believe in the in the First Amendment in principle, even if it's against his own interest. God forbid. We why do you that same argument can be used against these anti or these pro-Palestine like visa holders, right? That you so much want to defend, and you're telling me, well, they disagree with me, so why can't I just get rid of them? There's nothing illegal about it. I mean, that's the
Well,
same
no,
arguments you're using.
I think it's different. Those are private citizens, they're going about their day. But if you know, Trump isn't like paying 2% of their salaries or whatever. If
He allowed them to come to this country. What do you mean? That's way bigger than 2% of your budget. You know what I mean? Like the idea that
well,
we're gonna let you
even
come
so,
live in the United States.
the
Get out of
perfect
here.
the perfect analogy would be, what would be perfectly analogous would be if I were paying 2% of somebody. I was an employer and I was paying 2% of somebody's salary or whatever, or maybe I was a charitable donator, and then all of a sudden they come out and say, "Oh, that Daring guy, he's a POS. I hate him." I'm like, "Whoa, what the heck?" Well, I'm not going to give you your 2% anymore. So, I think on that level, I think what Trump is doing is fine. There are other media outlets and they're not going away that
The
if you want the
reason
same.
the reason that your situation was not analogous is because, Congress is who funded this agency. It has been signed by a president, right? You can't
Mhm.
just you can't just revoke money. And I understand that you prefaced it as assuming this is even legal. I understand that. But the fact is that if Congress appropriates the funding, you can't just deny it because what, you don't like what they said? Like that's not a good reason, like that's juvenile. Get the
Well,
the hell out
well,
of here.
and my assumption is that the institutions will prevail. Like I think ultimately, Trump really doesn't have any standing to do this. Like you were saying, it is Congress. But so I guess it's almost not even worth arguing my point because I'm ultimately arguing a non-thing. I was more of just in my mind, yeah, well, I won't even go back into it. I was basically arguing a non thing. So maybe it wasn't even worth touching on. But
Fair enough. You got any other dying comments on that one?
no, I think we've about covered it on that one.
Okay, bet. Well, let's move on.